and I had just one thing planned when we landed in Ecuador: to meet a guy for coffee. We needed 1,000 meters of traditional Ecuadorian fabric, and we had received an email from an Ecuadorian man saying he knew of a place.
So we flew to Ecuador's capital and met him at a coffee shop. He told us about a fabric town several hours away and got us on a bus headed in the right direction.
In the fabric town, we asked a local how to get to the town's market. And from the market, we followed a vendor to her cousin's fabric shop.
The cousin then got us a cab to take us to her shop's out-of-town warehouse, and the cab driver stopped to ask directions from a couple of friends along the way.
From the warehouse, a worker walked us down train tracks to a home, where we finally followed the owners of the home to their factory behind the house.
This is Ronaldo and Maria Elena on the day we showed up, totally unannounced, at their fabric factory, hidden high up in the Andes Mountains.
And this is how we find fabric. Allie and I have spent the last 4 years traveling the world in search of its funkiest traditional fabrics. And for every country we've been to, there's been one reliable trick that helps us find what we're looking for. Here it is. Plan nothing.
So backing up a bit, why is it that we look for fabric in the first place?
The short answer is that we run a business making backpacks out of these fabrics. We get fabric from a country like Thailand, for example, and our rock star team of seamstresses here in Virginia sew the fabrics into backpacks. Once each backpack is sold, we microloan part of the profits to a farmer or a small business owner in the country where the fabric came from, connecting the world in our own small way.
With Google and guidebooks at our fingertips, we used to try and plan our whole trip from home before even setting foot in the country. But it never worked. We just never found fabric that way. There aren't very many people out there traveling to find large amounts of traditional fabric, so the advice we found was pretty bad. Once we were then in the country, we spent all of our time following this bad advice and too focused on our plans to recognize the real opportunities when they presented themselves.
So we cut the plans, and that opened so many doors.
We found that plans can actually be blinders, blocking out the real opportunities in our periphery. And with no plans, our senses come alive.
We're so much more observant of our surroundings because we're looking for clues, like this woman in Peru, using fabric to carry her baby. And once we find these clues, we actually interact with local people like her to ask where we can find that fabric too.
Eventually, this mentality of traveling with no plans drifted from our fabric travels into our leisure travels too. With no plans, we allowed ourselves to wander down our own path and follow Andean music we could hear in the distance to find a tiny Ecuadorian festival filled with dancing, live music, and costumes.
And no schedule means no fear of falling behind on that schedule. So when we crossed paths with these monks in Laos, we could spend all afternoon skipping rocks with them on the Mekong River.
We quickly realized that these days we traveled without a plan actually turned out to be the days that we remembered the most. These were the days we caught a tiny glimpse of everyday life in a new culture, and those were the experiences that really stuck.
But the idea of traveling without a plan startles most people. When we told other travelers that we met in Cusco, Peru, that we did not have plans to go to Machu Picchu, they were appalled. How could you come all the way to Cusco and not see Machu Picchu? And I admit I understand their skepticism, but as we talked more about our plan-free way of traveling and the places we stumbled upon, the people we met, many of these travelers went from appalled to just surprised and finally intrigued.
So we invited them to join us, to put their plans down for a day and find fabric during their travels too. We told them our story about connecting the world through these backpacks made of traditional fabric, and if they would find fabric during their travels, we'd make backpacks from their fabric too. We'd give the traveler the first backpack to remember their trip by, and the remaining backpacks would be used to share a bit of their destination's culture with others.
So now, hundreds of travelers are hunting for fabric around the world, and they're each having their own unique, raw experiences too. Like Alex, who walked past this Moroccan fabric shop every single day on her way into town. And while most other people just breezed past without a second look, the fabric hunt removed Alex's blinders, and she came to really appreciate the art being made there each day. So she brought back fabric from the shop to put on her line of totes and share it with others.
Brandy, while studying abroad in China, had Chinese classmates help her find a local fabric. These classmates took Brandy off the beaten path in search of fabric and gave Brandy her own lesson on the role of peonies in Chinese culture, a lesson she then shared with others through her line of China totes.
And in Rwanda, Michael noticed something during his walks and bus rides around town that he never noticed before: clothing. Women's clothing, even. He was so much more observant of the colorful culture around him because of his mission to find this fabric for his line of Rwanda totes.
During our fabric hunt in Ecuador, no plans meant we relied heavily on the local people to show us the way. And we became a part of their community for the day. They got us to a fabric factory that Google Maps didn't even know existed, and in doing so, taught us the power of community.
And that is what travel is all about: experiencing firsthand a new way of living. No matter how you travel, new people are there to learn from. But when you travel without plans, that's when you free yourself to experience all that they have to teach. Thank you.